Makes for good TV, but doesn't help us much.
We've actually really been enjoying this is our, I think, fifth or so endorsement interview that we've done. It's been a really great process. The idea here is just for us to get to know you guys a little bit better and just to look at why, not necessarily why you're qualified, but almost why should the source endorse you for this. And we're going to ask a series of questions. It'd be great if you could try to limit your answers to 2 minutes, just so we can keep, cover a lot of territory. And it's better if this is more of a conversation than just even a Q&A. We'll start out here.
Sure. So just for starters, it'd be great to hear about kind of what concerns you've been hearing about from people as you've been campaigning, or certainly in your current position as a city councilor. What's at the top of people's list of concerns, and what do you think you plan to do about those?
Well, people have been really receptive to the campaign, which is great, and I did expect that. Really what I'm about and what I'm trying to work on is to fix some of the wasteful spending that's going on in city government right now, get a little bit more voice from the public, and try to get a bit more responsible approach to where we're headed in the future, how we accommodate growth, and where we go with where Ben's heading, and how we do it so that we're not pricing out half of our population, how we make our housing an affordable mix, how we manage our infrastructure projects, which you'll hear about, I'm sure, and how we manage those responsibly so that we're getting what we need, but not overspending and getting the gold-plated option at every turn. And I think just, what I've been hearing from people is that those are also their concerns, and that there's a lot of angst and a lot of concern in the community about what's happening next. People who are no longer able to afford to live here, or they're financially stretched to exist as they are now, and sort of see the train coming at them. So I think people are very receptive about keeping our neighborhoods having the character that they have now, making sure that when we do grow, we do it responsibly and in an affordable way. So I've been pretty pleased by what I've been hearing from people that I talk to.
Are there any additional issues that you've heard when you're in the campaign trail that have surprised you, that you just did not expect to hear people talking about? You're like, I didn't realize that dog poop was such a big deal.
Well, it's interesting. You hear a lot of very focal, localized complaints and concerns sometimes. One of the things that we hear a lot in this part of the neighborhood, part of Bend, is vacation rentals are a huge issue. Certainly that's something that we need to take the lead on in council and make sure that we're not, again, pricing people out of their homes at the expense of kind of an amoebic hotel that sort of sprawls over a part of Bend. I think that's probably a focal complaint to one area of our town, but certainly something that needs to be addressed. I wasn't unaware of that issue because I live in this area, but certainly people in this neighborhood are concerned about that. And there's a lot of concern over on the Century Drive area about the siting of the OSU Cascades campus. That's been a hot button issue. Again, not something I didn't know about, but those seem to be, people are very vocal about that. And then the water project that has been kind of pushed along by my friend over here is of a huge concern to a group of people that have worked on that. I'm one of those people, but that's a lot of people feel very strongly about that.
Have you heard any concerns that you would say are localized to the east
I'll
side
get
of
in
town?
We'll be back.
I can go take a nap.
Go ahead.
We can,
yeah, whatever.
No, go ahead if you're.
I was just curious briefly if you'd heard any concerns that you feel are localized to the east side of town. I feel like a lot of the concerns that come up in council and conversations in general are very downtown, west centric.
That's what I hear from people on the east side, is that they don't feel represented and they feel like they're sort of another town. That's something that should work better. But that's what I hear a lot from there, is that they don't feel represented.
Mark, who wants to?
I actually live on the east side, so I think they are sort of represented. But I think the big difference is how do we keep Bend the place we want it to be? The reason I moved home, the reason a lot of people are here, how do we maintain that Well, we're going to continue to go through substantial growth. I mean, the Portland State forecast is for 2030 to hit 120,000 population. So that's a 50% growth over the next 16 years. So if that comes true, how do we make sure we still want to be here? That we haven't completely screwed it up. I think where we got behind during the last big growth spurt was on infrastructure. And so I think the big difference between Nathan and I is, do we try and plan for that growth, or do we stick our head in the sand? We have come up with a long-term plan for water. We have a long-term plan for sewer. And by long-term, I mean that we have figured out how to fund and what the projects are over the next 25, 30 years. And those plans can be slowed down or sped up depending on what happens with population growth. So the sewer plant is an example. We have a 30-year plan on the sewer plant that is in phases, and each phase is tied to a population level. And so we can say, okay, we need to kick in this phase that we thought was going to be at 10 years out, and it's either now 8 years or 12 years or whatever, depending on where things happen. And that kind of long-term thinking, so that we make sure we don't screw it up, I think is really important. I would say our weakness is in transportation. We have a good short-term fix with the GO bond, so we've gotten some projects done, but we don't have a good long-term, how do we fund it and what are the projects, and that's really my goal for the next year.
Is that what you're hearing from, do you hear from people on the streets that they are looking for transportation?
And transportation is not just roads, it's roads, transit, bike ped, so yes.
Yeah, I'm talking
Absolutely.
about transit. And
Yeah,
you're
absolutely.
hearing that from,
Absolutely.
okay.
And with OSU, it's moved transit up into people's minds a little more, which is, I think, a good thing. Now, my opponent says there's a lot of wasteful spending. In my mind, the answer to that is two things. One, we're making long-term investments. So you have to think about the water project as an example. That's a 100-year project. You know, that's going to benefit our community, you know, for generations. And then you take a look at rates. Nathan sat on SIAC, and granted, he showed up at less than half of the meetings, but SIAG and out of his committee recommended a 9% increase in sewer. That's an awful thing to have to vote for when you're on council. I mean, rate increases are the worst thing to try and do.
Sure.
But you also have to pay for the infrastructure. You know, you have to pay for the sewer plant, you have to pay for the sewer collection system. And if you want to stop paying for it, well, then we're going to have a problem, and it might be 5 years from now or 10 years from now, but it's not good long-term thinking. So one of the things to look at is rates.
Why do you feel like the city did such a poor job of preparing for this point? I mean, I think everybody agrees that the city got behind during the last growth period.
Right.
What caused that?
There was so much going on, they were just plugging holes.
Right.
Rather than thinking out. Just to finish my other point is, you know, rates are not a fun thing to raise.
Sure.
But you look at them compared to how do we compete with other communities, and Bend is right in the middle in terms of what's your total water, sewer, utility bill. You know, Portland, this is all the cities in Oregon over 20,000 population. Portland's 132 a month. We're at 76 and going to go to 81. And, you know, with the increase, we're right near the middle.
So, Boddie, do you oppose the sewer project?
Well, you know, I would respond to sort of that I hope I'm involved in planning for the future. That's why I participated in the sewer infrastructure group. I think that the city council can't abdicate its responsibility to citizen advisory groups that are made up of mixed interests. There was a vocal minority on the sewer infrastructure group that argued against the amount of sewer increase, and those are part of the public record. I'm one of those voices, and I shared those with council as well. I think that we do have to plan appropriately, but what I hear and what I have heard is that we will have this big ticket infrastructure project for water, and we'll have this big ticket infrastructure project for sewer, and we're going to stick the ratepayers and the taxpayers with the cost of that, and then we're going to pass this along to the ratepayers as well. And gosh, it sure would be nice to work on transportation. Let's have another big ticket item, and let's pass that along to the local residents. And what we're doing is we're spending at every juncture. We're picking the most expensive option. We're gambling with taxpayer money. We're building without even the knowledge that we're going to use these things that are going in the ground. And now we've spent ourselves out of being able to fix what would help residents, like public transportation, fixing roads, making sure we don't have traffic congestion, responsible growth. So I think that we do need to do those things. I think the reason that we can't, and the reason that we sometimes do get in these holes that we have to fill, is because we've spent all of our money, and I say we, the taxpayer money is being spent very willingly on sort of pet projects that have a few limited interests to benefit, but not necessarily the residents of Bend.
Mark?
A pet project, delivering water, hauling, I guess you can say hauling away sewer is a pet project, but I just find that kind of incredible. I think there's also a lack of understanding on how state budget law works. You can't spend less money on sewer and then take that money and go spend it on roads. You know, the sewer fund is a separate fund. It's like a separate business that has to be siloed.
Sure.
You know, and so is sewer glamorous? You know, is everybody? It's like buying tires for your car. You know, haul your friend out and say, "Look at my new tires. These are really cool." No, it's not a fun thing to spend money on, and it's not a fun thing to raise rates on. But it's the fundamentals of running the community, and you know, you know, like I said, it's not fun to raise rates. It's the worst boat you ever make.
Sure. Let me try to move on from sewer. It's an incredibly exciting topic. Let me ask about Mirror Pond, and I don't really need to hear your opinion about what we should do with Mirror Pond, but how would you say the process has been going? And I'd like to just hear some feedback on whether you think that is, you know, something that we should be emulating again on other projects in the future, or whether there's changes that you've observed in that process that you would make different. You can start.
Okay. Well, I got involved on Mirror Pond on the actual committee about a year ago. Right when I was getting on the committee was when the Parks District came out with those drawings that when I looked at them, I said, you know, I can't really see much difference in them. I'm having a hard time viewing. So I thought that whole process was not well done. I think the one thing we've learned that I think is really important is that there's a split in the community. And I think it's pretty even between I want it to look like a river again, or I want to save Mirror Pond, and those are kind of the split. And you know, from talking to people, I think it's about even. And so what we've done is we've gone back and we've talked about how do we move this thing forward. If you know, we don't want to have a split community, how do we bring everybody together?
Sure.
So the other thing we've heard from people is they don't want to pay for it. You know, fix it, but we don't want to pay for it. So we're working on an idea, and in fact, yesterday I was in Portland all day meeting with the CEO of Pacific Power and the CEO of Pacific Core to talk to them about their involvement. And it went really well. So I think within the next couple of weeks, we're going to pull together the committee again and go over a concept that will turn it back into what looks like a river again, but still maintain the pond level. And do it as a public-private partnership so that the public isn't paying for it. And so we're gonna take this concept and take it to the committee. Then the next step after that will be taking it out to the public and say, okay, kick it around. Tell us what you like, what you dislike.
What do you mean by kick it around?
Well, we're gonna want everybody's input. You know,
I mean, is there gonna be a vote?
I don't know yet. Maybe. It's not something they're going to have to vote on in terms of money, because what we're hoping to do is be able to do it with private money.
Sure.
But we want everybody's opinion on, do they like the concept. Now, I think what we're thinking about is going to give both sides, the people that want it to look more like a river with fish passage and all that kind of stuff, it'll give them what they want, but it'll also give, you know, what seems to be mostly the old timers in Bend that want to keep the pond, give them what they want as well. And so I'd be surprised if it isn't well accepted, but I want to see what they have to say.
Well, to respond to, is this the sort of thing that we should be emulating for future projects? I sure hope not. A lot of this has been taking place out of the public view. A lot of it has been done behind closed doors. And so far, we're about $200,000 of public funds into the analysis, and we're no further along in any decision at all. My opponent's right, the public is about split 50-50. There's not a lot of middle ground, which is why there's a lot of tap dancing around the issue. I think when that happens, we need leadership to lead the way as to what we should be doing. One thing that is just hydrologically true about Mirror Pond is that if we do nothing, that's really not an option. We'll just have a big mud puddle. It's an iconic sort of feature of downtown Bend. I think it does deserve some leadership, and that's what I will plan to do.
On the issue of leadership, Scott Ramsey in his endorsement interview said that he feels like the council needs more leadership, you know, more direction, and it has been posited that the current council system is somewhat outmoded. It's admirable that everybody does it for $200 a month, and I think everybody's grateful. But when you look at 120,000 people possibly moving here, do you feel that it's time for a change in that direction, or is this the council in its current state something that you see functioning and moving forward?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think it does need a structural change. That's a big undertaking to sort of change government, but the way Bend's council's designed is a little bit odd. It works well perhaps for a city of 10,000. It doesn't work well for a city of this size. It will really not work well for a city a bit larger. It's really designed to have a weak council, weak elected representation, because in a small enough place, there are a few people probably calling the shots, and I think as a larger place, we can't afford to do business that way anymore. And I think that there does need to be better representation of the residents of Bend. The council's job is to represent their interests and to advocate for the residents and citizens. And too often what happens is council members are advocating for the interests of the city government or the city government, bureaucratic structure, and the responsibility that they feel toward the voter is sort of subsumed by the responsibility to be a mouthpiece for kind of city government. And I think it should flow the other direction, and that will come fundamentally with changing some things. That's certainly something that should happen as Bend grows.
Well, just a quick response to that, and then I'll tell you what I think we ought to do. But you know, if I'm thought of as a mouthpiece for staff, I guess you weren't here when I was the counselor who led the charge to fire the last city manager, and I would say that that's probably not what staff would think of as a mouthpiece for them. But I think today we have a really good staff. They're bright people, they work hard. Are they perfect? No. Do I agree with everything they do? No. But I think overall the community can be very proud of the staff we have. And there's, I think, been a good culture shift at the city since we changed leadership, the city manager and most all of his department heads. The structure of council, to answer your question, is I don't think there's a perfect solution for this. There are pros and cons to all of the possible ways you could structure this, but I think we made a good change, 10 years ago when we stopped the beauty contest vote and went to individual seats. I think that is a better approach to the election. I think that right now the way it's set up, to change the amount of pay council gets and to change how the mayor is selected, we need to go out to a vote and change the city charter. And I think this year isn't the right year to do that, but but next year would be, because this year with only 3 councilors seats open, and 2 years from now there's 4 seats, so you could take one of those 4 seats and make it an elected mayor, so then you'd have 3 and 3 each every other year. Or if you did it with this election, it would have been 2 councilors and a mayor, and it just gets a little odd. So I think the next round is when we need to explore that. And when you go out for the charter amendment for that, I think council pay should be addressed. And the challenge with council pay is everybody on council is cognizant that it looks awfully self-serving.
Right. Yeah. I don't imagine this is going to be driven by council. But
and so, one way to approach that is if we put the charter change to the community, we could say, okay, let's change council pay, but it doesn't go into effect for until all of us are off council or something like that. I mean, sure. you could do something like that to make it so that it doesn't look so self-serving. I know when Orrin Teeter went off council, however many years ago, he said, when I get off council, I'm going to lobby to raise council pay. But then he got into other things and
sure.
didn't. But it's something that I think should be done.
Okay.
I know this week alone, today's Thursday, and I think I've already got 30 hours in council.
Right. Yeah, that's a lot.
Can I say a quick follow-up to Mark?
Sure.
So what Nathan was saying about that kind of idea that council just serves the interests of city government, kind of goes with whatever they present, is something I hear a lot. So I'm curious to hear what you think is the reason that people have that perception, if, as you say, it's not necessarily true.
I think if somebody watches, you watch all the council meetings, we have some fairly good debate over issues. So I don't think it's thought of I don't think we're a rubber stamp by any means, but I think staff is doing a better job of bringing us good alternatives.
Mark, Nathan, this is a 3-part question, and Mark, I guess. Similar question to you. Nathan, I'm curious, who on council are you most excited to work with?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you most concerned about working with?
Oh boy.
And then looking at the council as a whole team, what is it that you're bringing that you feel is important to council that's not currently there?
Okay. Before, if I may, I just respond to kind of the comment about a mouthpiece, or as Mark says, a rubber stamp. I won't guarantee that my facts are completely right, but I believe his voting record is 100% along the recommendations of the city government. So
yeah, that's
my guess is
not correct.
It's pretty close. So my guess is that that's where the perception comes from.
We'll vet it.
Yes. I don't know how the exact number, but it's close to all the time. So to respond to your question, I'm most excited to work with Mayor Clinton. I think he's a really interesting, dynamic guy. I've admired him and I've worked on a lot of issues with the city in the past. And I think it'll be fun to work with him. He takes a scientific and a very reasoned approach to things. I'm a trained scientist as well before heading to med school. So I like that approach that's analytical and intelligent and one hopes unbiased. I'm running for the seat that I'm running for because that's the counselor I'm most concerned about. I think that perhaps Scott is a bit of a follower. It kind of goes along with some of the lousy decisions that get made. So I would be looking forward to talking with him and hopefully bringing him around on a few issues. I think what I bring to council is a voice for the community and the residents, and I would do my best to represent their interests in a dynamic and leading way rather than, as I have heard, and what I'm concerned about is kind of the wasteful approach to going along with the status quo and whatever kind of comes down from city government.
That's good. Same idea of the question, but differently. Looking at council as a team, what right now do you feel like it's lacking? What are you potentially hopeful with this current round of elections that some new voices or energy or dynamic could be brought to council? Just sort of give the coach's analysis of the team, if you were.
You know, it's an interesting group.
Mm-hmm.
And a year ago I would probably answer the question differently. But I think today this group is working better together, and the group has good diversity in terms of perspectives. I think I get frustrated with Sally, I get frustrated with Doug. Last night I was frustrated with Victor, and trying to convince them of what I think is right. But what it does is it creates really good debate. And that's what we're there for. I mean, that's why, that's what makes democratic society fun, is to argue about issues and disagree and try and come up with a better solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think today there's a pretty good blend of different approaches. And so I think we're fairly representative of the community.
In terms of leadership, losing Jody is and looking at the two candidates that may fill that seat. Predictions on the difference, sort of if that's your choose your adventure, which can you look at how that's going to affect the dynamics?
Well,
because they're very different candidates.
They are very different candidates. I think Casey is more pro-infrastructure, and he understands, because he's been on infrastructure advisory and he's been on SAG, he understands the infrastructure needs. Plus his background is in water infrastructure, so he understands that stuff. So he could bring a lot to the table. I haven't seen enough from Lisa to know where she is on those issues. But she seems like a very bright lady, seems like a very nice lady. So I think we've got good candidates. So I think we'll end up with a strong person there, regardless.
Okay.
And it might have more diversity. You just never know.
Cost of living is something that's come up a lot in all of the endorsement interviews and just public conversation in general. What role do you think the city plays in ensuring that people can afford to live in Bend, and what would you actually do to kind of address that issue?
Mark, why don't you start?
Okay. Affordable housing is a challenge to get your arms around, because we don't have a huge fund of money to go out and set up affordable housing. But I think we've done a good job with the revolving fund from the affordable housing fee that we have on building permits. I'm trying to remember, what is it, half of 1% or something like that. But it's now built up over the last, we put that in 7 years ago, I guess. You know, it's in the millions of dollars now, and it's funding some pretty cool affordable housing projects. We've also put out an RFP on some land that we own that was surplus land that we bought to do some roads, and there's enough land there to do another affordable housing project, so we're putting out an RFP on that. And the funds that we're using, we're doing them as like no interest loan kind of things, so to get the project off the ground. It also gives them the ability to get better grant funding because they see a local buy-in on the projects. So I think that's a pretty good first step, but it's really hard to get your arms around because there's just not enough. I think part of the issue is availability of land, so it's driving up lot prices. So the Southeast Interceptor that we approved last night, another phase of the Southeast Sewer, will open up land. There's thousands of acres on the southeast side that haven't been able to be developed. They're already inside the city limits, but they're lots that will come on within the next year or two, and that will increase supply and hopefully bring down pricing.
But beyond housing, what role do you, like, you're kind of talking about this idea that, you know, there are these things that need to be fixed, but no one wants to pay for them, whether it's transportation or
Right.
The idea of, you know, concerns about utility rates going up. How do you balance that need for infrastructure with residents that either can't or don't want to pay?
Right. It's a tough thing to balance, and those are the decisions at council that make you lay awake at night thinking about them, because when you increase a fee, you pretty much know you're going to get 100 nasty emails, and so it's just not a fun time. But that is what you're weighing, and you look at things like this where you say, okay, how do we compare? Are we you know, trying to keep it low and within reason? And then you know, you look at our property tax rate. Our property tax rate is one of the lowest in the state. Redmond's property tax rate is twice what ours is. And you know, you look at our general fund and you say, okay, 85% of our general fund goes to police and fire. Well, we just got the operating levy for fire, and that's going to help a lot. But police is still underfunded. What it says is there isn't a lot of room to go out and do fun projects because there isn't extra money to spread around.
So affordable housing, a healthy mix of housing for Bend and making Bend more affordable are crucial. That's what keeps Bend a community and keeps us a town. What we must not do is develop irresponsibly and become a town where people come for a vacation and leave, but no one actually lives here, but the very, very wealthy, and everything's just sort of a vacation town or somewhere that collapses even worse because no one can afford to live here, and we get into a boom bust model that we've seen in the past 10 years. We're not just talking about affordable housing at the low end, we're not talking about subsidized or low end, we're talking about middle class, young families, professionals that can't afford to live in Bend anymore, that can't afford to buy or in many cases even rent a house. So we have to develop a more affordable mix and make Bend function as a meaningful town. We have to keep that going as we grow. Unfortunately, I think the version of affordable housing that is espoused by the incumbent is affordable for a few developers in the form of some free land on the periphery and a lot of zoning which assists large single-family construction. That's fine, we need some of that if somebody wants a big house with a big yard, That's something we should have in our town, but we have to have a mix of housing that allows regular citizens, young people, families, and business owners to function and to have employees in town, and indeed in many cases have homes ourselves. I don't think we get there by levying further fees on people. It's true that not all of our funding comes from property tax, but ratepayers in Bend pay more in property tax or more in utility and water fees than they do in property tax. So it's not a question of what pot the money comes in. It's still taken out of the wallets of residents and voters. So I think we don't get there by imposing further fees. I think we get there by using city government as it should be designed, as zoning and promoting development that has a mixture of housing, and we use our growth to promote growth across the demographic and income level. So I think that's how we get there, is we use our government for what it should be doing is and protecting our town and keeping it the way that we like it.
Mark, do you want to respond?
I just would love to hear specifics, because everything, we should lower taxes, we should lower fees, we should have more affordable, more workforce housing. Everything sounds like a really good soundbite, but when you get down to reality, you made a comment in the press not long ago that we should lower what we collect on property taxes. Okay, so where do you take it from? Do you fund less police? You talk about we need workforce housing and we need a blend. Okay, so how does a government tell the developer, we want you to build $200,000 houses instead of $500,000 houses? I mean, we can put incentives in place, but you don't have specifics to talk about that kind of stuff. So for instance, we can, one of the things we've been looking at is the ability to upzone if they're willing to build affordable housing. So it increases the number of units that they can build on a parcel. But then how do you blend that with the neighborhood next door so that you don't cause a problem?
Sure.
And there's all kinds of issues, but so far all I hear from you are sound bites.
Mm-hmm.
Don't really have any meaning.
I know we said we wouldn't get into a debate, but I'll let you respond
Sure.
to that.
Well, I think the specifics are
Thanks,
we use our zoning law to incentivize the types of development that we want. And when we expand our urban growth boundary, we make sure we do it in the areas that make most sense to grow. And when we incentivize a developer, you don't tell them what price they can put on a house. You make your zoning law work for the city so that there's a mix of housing that is naturally of different price ranges. And the way you do that is, that's how you run your zoning and your planning. I think what you don't do is give away to a few select friends who stand to benefit, and I think that's what's been done in the past, and I think that's what we want to avoid.
I would love to see a specific on that one, because I can't think of anything I've given to a friend.
Yeah.
I don't want to respond to specifics.
Or the council as a whole. I wouldn't, you can make accusations, but you got to come up with something real.
Well,
I want to be cognizant of time, and also I think the claws are starting to come out, which is when usually I think you guys have both presented yourselves very well, and your arguments, and I think the differences are clear, the philosophical as well as some of the personality differences are clear. What I'd like to hear from each of you is just why do you want our endorsement, and why do you think you deserve our endorsement? Why don't we start with the challenger and then go for the incumbent?
Well, having lived here and obviously reading the source since I've been here for news and good coverage of local government, I think I certainly have agreed with many of your positions in the past from the editorial side of things. I valued your input. I think it would be a great honor if you chose to endorse me. I think that we tend to see things similarly in the way that Bend should be growing in the future. and we seem to have similar positions on some of the flawed things that have happened and that are ongoing. So I think there's a natural fit there. It would obviously be a privilege to me to have your endorsement and to have the vote of approval.
I would very much like to have your endorsement, and I think a good analogy is my wife and I have been married for 34 years, and we don't agree on everything. So the chances that you guys and I will agree on everything are slim to none. I mean, my wife tells me when I vote wrong, when I climb into bed after a council meeting, so and so do you guys. But that dialogue is valuable, and you know that I'm open to it. I mean, you can pick up the phone and call and ask me a question, or give me your opinion, and I like that. I have been on council 8 years. I think I have a good grasp of what needs to get done at the city, but I'm also open to, I enjoy getting feedback from people. And I'm from here, and I moved home after my corporate career because I wanted to be here. And I'm doing it, not just for the huge salary. I'm doing it because I care about the community. I think one of my jobs at American, I was in charge of planning for the central third of the U.S. and I kind of bring that to the city in terms of how do we think long term, how do we, the vacation rental issue that's come up. Last night I was really pleased with the approach we decided to take, because we didn't take a knee-jerk reaction to the passion that was coming to council the last couple of meetings. I mean, there were very passionate people on both sides, and we said, okay, let's stop and make sure we study this thoroughly and look at it and come up with a good long-term solution for this issue, rather than just a short-term fix that's going to cause us trouble down the road. And that's how I tend to approach all of the issues. It's how do we make sure that 20 years from now we still want to live here.
Great. Thank you both, and I mean, thank you both for running and for council. It's a lot. It's often thankless, and I appreciate all the effort that you guys put into it.
And I can be hard on Mark, and that's kind of part of the game. But that is a laudable thing to be a public servant, and I think deserves respect. So.
Great. Thank you both. Issue comes out in 2 weeks. Our endorsement issue does.
I look forward to it.
All right.
Thanks.